You're listening to A Creative Excuse, presented by Echo Amano. Hope you all are staying safe and healthy and balanced and maybe unwrapping a few gifts from this experience. This episode is Cara Duval. We're married. I've been hanging out with this lady for over 20 years now. We recorded this on our anniversary, so that's very cute. Hope you enjoy it. It was kind of funny trying to figure out how to talk to each other in the format of a podcast, so that was kind of interesting. On view at Echo Amano, virtually anyhow, is the work of Jason Garcia. That work will be up through May 25th, so hopefully we'll be able to have some open hours and get some people in to see the work in person. Everything's online, and through April we're offering free shipping, and 10% of all sales through April is going to go to Santa Fe Community Foundation COVID-19 relief efforts. So a little support there for our community. Enjoy this episode. It was a cool one. All right. Thanks for listening.
Hi.
So the last time we did this, it was a little awkward. What was going on there? I think it was just for me, I think it was like this idea of like translating how we are with each other into a format where other people are listening. And because we have this, we have our own language.
Yeah, and a lot of it is heavily relied on meowing, which...
Big part of it is meowing.
That wouldn't transfer so well.
Right. I mean...
Some people would get it.
Cat people would probably get it.
Yeah. So, yeah, there would be a select few in the audience that would be right there with us.
They'd be feeling the meows.
Yeah.
They'd be feeling the meows.
But yeah, for me, I think, like you said, it was suddenly feeling the formality of the situation, and that sent me into quite an awkward shutdown.
Well, it's funny, right? Like, I think when I do these podcasts, in general, it's with people I don't know very well.
You don't know me.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that this is a little different than that. Because with the folks that I don't know super well, like, this is like a form it's a format that allows for a kind of reason to like get to know each other for me, because I require things being a project in order to feel motivation to do that.
Sure. I think that's quite common, that we need some parameters for our creative impulses. Otherwise they get they can feel lost, or they can feel too wide open. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're a bit better, I think, than me of not needing those parameters to facilitate human connection.
Sure, maybe. I mean, I feel that's interesting. So I feel like, we've talked about this a lot, that growing up, I was really quite awkward and didn't fit in with my peer groups. And, the people that I hung out with were mostly my parents' friends. And then I would have maybe two friends at any given time that understood me and that I understood them. But for the most part, I was pretty alone. And I think that entering high school, it just became so imperative for me to make connections and reach out. And then there was this sense of like, I'm not going to survive unless I learn how to engage with people. And I wanted to engage with people on a very deep, personal, intimate level.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've always wanted that.
So you feel like you made a conscious shift?
Yeah, I went from isolating myself and being like, the world doesn't understand me and it sucks, to I actually need to make an effort and I have to get into the game and reach out and make connections. This other way is not working.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's when I found theater. And I mean, theater is all about relationship and working with a group of people to create a story and to create a world.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Do you feel like it's easy for you now?
To do that, I feel way more skilled. Mm-hmm. And it's a devotional practice of mine.
Mm-hmm.
To face the awkwardness and look past the initial sense of otherness and connect with the deeper human need of being seen and being validated.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the devotional practice is really feeling like that is what heals. Like core healing happens when we feel like we've been seen or we see someone else and we're accepted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I'm just now starting to get that.
Uh-huh.
I mean, not that I didn't get that concept or that as a principle, but I think that I've spent so much of my life kind of inward focused in a way. I mean, of course, there's been points that are more externally focused, but I mean, I think that I grew up as without siblings for the most part, and was kind of on my own for a lot of the time, and so that was just, I don't know, I think I really just took that and ran with it and was just like, okay, I'm gonna make it on my own, not that I didn't have support, but it was just, I felt like, and it came from not just the circumstances I found myself in, but like, I think my dad had such a drive to like do it himself, I think that really played into it. But yeah, and of course I had friends. It was just been a different MO for me, you know, and I feel like, and maybe timeline is really irrelevant, right? When like that phrase you mentioned a while back, I think you came up with, that if we wake up, it's never too late, you know, and that,
I don't know if I came up with that, but I put my own spin on it and wrote it down. Yeah.
You wrote it down. But anyway, now is just the time in my life where I feel like I'm making that conscious shift towards, I've always been in relationship. What's the best way to put it? Like I'm making a conscious shift more towards connecting with others in a way. I don't know. It's hard for me to put it into words because I could also say that I've always been attempting to connect with others too. It's just a different, I don't know. It's a different moment for me. Sure.
I would imagine that there are a lot of people right now that are feeling that way.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, that's a good segue, right? Like,
sure. Okay.
Today is April 1st.
Yep.
It's our anniversary, our wedding anniversary. And our cats are present.
And that's their birthday. Today is their birthday as well.
Also their birthday. So we've been married for 13 years and together going on almost 21. And
which is, we're kind of rare birds in these times.
Right. No, it's true, because we're both almost 40. So we got together when we were 19. So it's a pretty rare thing these days. I was talking with this guy that we were hiking with today, and he was saying, like, yeah, you really only think about that with old people.
Well, yeah. Sometimes I feel like we're old people or old souls, but.
So yeah, coronavirus. We're both of us, right, closed down our businesses.
Yeah, I'm a massage therapist,
and so
I can't touch people right now.
We both closed down right around the 13th of March, around there. Mm-hmm. So before the state sort of issued their order, and so we've been indoors a lot together, more than usual. I mean, because that's the thing, like, we've been together and spent a lot of time together, but we've always had our own sort of things that we go do.
Yeah.
And during the day, spend our 8 hours apart or whatever. Mm-hmm. And we've spent pretty much every day together, a lot of the day together since then.
Sure. But I mean, you're in your office, and I'm in my office, mm-hmm. which are on opposite ends of the house. So it is mm-hmm. kind of like we're in our own little worlds throughout the day.
A little bit, yeah. But, so do you want to talk a little bit about how, you can take this any way you want. So sure. How just whatever this world situation is, the coronavirus situation, how you doing with that?
How am I doing with that? Wow, that's one of those wide open, no parameters mm-hmm. kind of questions.
Well, I know it's appearing in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, sure.
So,
not being able to do my work, which is massage therapy, which, I know through and through helps in turbulent times and helps with trauma and helps people reconnect to their body and ground. And so then not being able to offer that has been strange. And also really feeling totally integrous in my decision to shut down my office on March 13th.
We were listening to something earlier today, and they were talking about how these acts of washing your hands and social distancing, while physically we are separate, like, it's actually a great big communal experiment. Mm-hmm. Not experiment, but communal practice. Mm-hmm. Like, we're all doing it together for humanity, just for other people. It's a selfless act.
Right.
And it's a communal act.
Yeah. Yeah. So, gosh, how is this affecting me? I feel, actually, I'll go back to that statement that I said, moments of elation. I actually, have felt over the past 3 weeks moments of such clarity and creative flow that I have experienced before, but like I don't know if it's the heightened intensity of everything. When they come through, they're so beautiful and precious. And that same podcast episode that we were listening to that you mentioned, or was it the other one? We've been listening to a lot of stuff as well. But talking about how in moments of crisis, statistics show, the history shows that us humans, we band together, and and that it actually is not the dystopian world that our fictional minds like to create, that it's actually in moments of crisis new innovation comes through, and a sense of purpose and humanity like really shines, and that was helpful, and I have been feeling that. And while I have not been able to do my massage practice, I've been making a lot of art, like more art than I have in quite some time besides the dancing. And that's the one thing I'm really, really, really missing right now is being able to dance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a lot.
No, that's great. I mean, that's, we need words for this podcast. So thank you. Yeah. I've been feeling that too. Like I've been in the zone that feels like, I think I mentioned it earlier, like syrupy liquid.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, time feels very strange right now. My sense of direction and purpose is altered. There's a lot of new energy coming in that I haven't made sense of yet. And so it's like there's a lot of new and there's a lot of letting go at the same time. And it's like it's happening really fast. And it's happening on such a large scale as well. And I think that we probably have the ability to tap into that sense that this is affecting everybody on the globe, right? Everybody is experiencing this in some way.
Yeah.
Unless they're totally removed, living in the Amazon jungle or something. But it's
an initiation.
It's touching everybody. It feels like that. Yeah. It feels like, And at the same time, we were talking about this earlier today, that I feel a greater sense of, I think, service to a larger ideal, a kind of more just a sense of universality. Like I'm feeling this like upwelling of desire to serve that. And maybe that's interrelated with what I was trying to explain earlier about like a sense of like wanting or feeling like more of an impulse to connect with others.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of what it's bringing up to me in a way that's very inspiring. There's certainly like the uncertainty about my business. There's the uncertainty about, I think actually that episode we listened today about the Great Alaskan Earthquake, and they were talking about how over and over again in times of disaster, people band together, people show up, people come to each other's aid. That was really helpful to hear. That was the 99% Invisible episode. If you want to look it up, it's called This Is Chance. Really, really poignant, applicable to right now. Because there is that fear of like, government using this as an opportunity to take away liberties, society breaking down, and people becoming like barbaric and like whatever, all that kind of fear stuff.
All of it is in there, right?
Yeah.
All of it is possible, and just as possible, and maybe even more so possible, is our ability to come together and really change this world into the world that we want, that we, like, our hearts want, this time is really showing us that all of these things that we've been talking about for a long time, and that, climate change and the inequality and classism and corruption in government, like we've been talking about that, and there's been this underlining cynicism and or not even underlining,
it's not possible.
It's not possible.
Yeah.
Defeatist attitude. Just in a very short time, there has been radical shifts. There has been suddenly like, oh, it is possible, and it's actually possible. There's the potential to heal on a like massive level that we could have never imagined prior to this experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I told you earlier, I've been thinking about Buckminster Fuller a lot, and there's this whole thing that you shared with me about the chick that's in the egg growing, and the chick is all very comfortable. It's very cozy in the egg until it gets to this critical point where it's not cozy anymore, right? Where it's really crowded, and there's this strong desire to liberate itself, and so it has to peck away on the inside of its shell to be birthed, and that's where I really feel that, like, that's where we are right now. We're pecking away at that shell that has been containing us to be birthed into something anew, and we're in the birth canal right now. All of us are like the mothers and, the babies.
Mm-hmm. Well, another thing that Buckminster Fuller said was that, and I think pretty clear, we have all the resources to solve all of the world's problems.
Totally.
All of the resources at our disposal right now.
Yep.
All that's lacking is the will.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's political will or will of, citizenry, whatever. But
and that trust, right? To let go of the old.
Mm-hmm.
Not to forget the old, right? Not to discredit that, but I think a lot about when we used to rock climb. And we would rock climb in a gym. It was in a gym. I'd be harnessed in, right? There's absolutely there's a very, very tiny percent chance that I will fall and hurt myself.
I'd have to let go of the rope or fall over.
Yeah. And yet there I would be in this moment where I'd be holding onto the wall, and the next move that I had, I would actually have to completely let go of the wall and jump, right? And I would just be racked with fear about doing that. Of letting go. Completely letting go and propelling myself forward to the next hold.
Yeah.
And that's, what I feel like that's what's needed, is that trust.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and, we're seeing it the U.S. government right now is showing us that it's possible through, ways that are distasteful, but
sure.
Within days, $2 trillion for Wall Street.
Yeah.
No questions asked.
Yeah.
How are we going to pay for this?
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about universal health care. We can't afford it.
Yeah.
How are we going to pay for this?
Yeah.
$2 trillion for Wall Street? No problem.
Sure. Or LA, what you were sharing with me about LA and the smog.
Oh.
Completely clearing over LA. And it's it's such a problem. How are we going to deal with this? And it's
Well, we can't get rid of cars. Well, and that's the thing, right? Okay, well...
We can't get rid of oil.
Yeah, right. So clearly, these problems can be solved very, very quickly if there's the will.
Yeah.
All these people, the hotels being opened up for homeless people. It's just what were we doing before? Why were we doing that before? It's pretty startling.
Chick and the comfort and the comfortable egg.
Yeah. All right. So you grew up in Houston. You have a couple parents that I think are pretty creative.
Definitely.
Can tell me a little bit about how you grew up and your interaction with. Tell me about your folks. What do your parents do?
Okay.
Did. Whatever.
Yeah. Sure.
It's funny because I already know the answers.
Okay, so my papa, we are officially known as there's Papa Bear, Mama Bear, Baby Bear, Brother Bear.
Is he a bear? I don't think. Is he part of the
bear? My brother is a bear. He just doesn't know it. Maybe he does know it. So my father worked for Bechtel for many years, and I am sorry to say, even though he's explained this to me many, many times, I still don't really fully understand what you did, Papa. I'm sorry. But I do know that he has been a very devout meditation practitioner for my whole life. He practices Zen Buddhism, Zen meditation. And when I think of him and what his heart is about and what his heart is about, I would say it's practicing wholehearted humanness, being a good human being and waking up and being of service. And he, growing up, he showed me in so many different ways about what it means to be kind and generous with one's attention. And I'm gonna cry. And really contemplating one's thoughts, one's actions, one's speech. Cultivating right speech and right actions.
Yeah.
So I owe him a lot. I really feel deeply in gratitude and I don't want to say indebted to him for gifting me that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think is so interesting about your dad is, so you had a number of years embedded in a balalaika orchestra that would be kind of like a resident orchestra at the Renaissance Fair in Houston.
Yes.
And it's funny to me to imagine actually both of your parents, but maybe more so your dad, as a performing musician.
Oh, and then there's this other part to him that has this huge flair for theater, and maybe that's where I got it from, is that he, when we were at the Renaissance Festival and they were performing, my dad played the guitar and my mom played the prima domra. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
And then my brother played the balalaika. My dad was a ham for the audience. He had like this white peasant Russian shirt they would wear and a big hat, and I have these memories of him just with he has a booming voice, actually. It's a very commanding booming voice when he wants it to be. And he would play it up for the audience. So there is that side to him as well. But I don't know if he shows it as much or if he has as much confidence in that side of him.
Well, Zen doesn't necessarily encourage a big, booming, boisterous voice.
I don't know. Maybe if you're fully aware of it.
Maybe so. And if you're not familiar, the balalaika is a three strings. Russian. It's a Russian instrument. And there's other instruments, Russian instruments. You'd play Russian folk music.
Yes.
Or they would play Russian folk music.
Yes. I would spin on the stage.
What would you do?
I was very young. My mom was pregnant with me when they were at the Renaissance Festival. And so I was born into the Renaissance Festival, essentially. And that was the first gypsy family. We were a part of the gypsy camp. And so I was surrounded by lots of eccentric people who, for some reason, banded together from their love of Russian folk music. And most of the people were not Russian, but there was just this love for the music. And I can understand that. There's this yearning and angst, and
It's a little like Fado.
I was just gonna say, it's very much like Fado. It's like remembering the good old days, you know, and yearning for when things were simple and beautiful. So yeah, that was like the first introduction at a in utero to community, creative community.
Yeah.
And then we had to stop going because some kid at some point, this is the story I remember, I could be getting this incorrect, but some kid made a pipe bomb and set it off in one of the bathrooms. And so the director of that Renaissance Festival made a rule that no kids were allowed. Parents weren't allowed to bring their kids anymore to the festival. So that was the end of the festival for us. And I was 8, I think, when that happened.
So would you go every year till then? Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's so cool.
I'm gonna, again, my memory is fuzzy, but I think it lasted a month, maybe 2 months.
Yeah, it was long.
Yeah, and we'd go every weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my mom has been a highly creative individual her whole life. She is an amazing visual artist. Did a lot of work with pastels and with gouache, and was an art teacher for many years, and then an art therapist, and then dived into children's writing, and I think had a 20-year stint. Yeah, I think 20 years with doing children's books. And then when they moved here, she was kind of at a crossroads, and was feeling like she needed to leave the children's writing behind, and fell back in love with clay, and has been doing hand building for the last, I guess, 2 years. But her mind is just ferocious and is constantly scheming and envisioning and gobbling up information and creating. And she has this admirable tenacity about her. When she sets her mind to do something, she does it and she sticks with it.
Yeah. So it's fair to say that there was some influence there.
Well, a little, yeah.
Well, I mean, you were surrounded.
Yeah. Oh, and then,
by creativity.
I can't leave out my brother. Hmm? My brother, I think he was really young. I think 13. He was named like the best balalaika player in all of Texas, which I don't know how many balalaika players there are in Texas, but he was 13. And he also has that tenacity. And, I think he was programming computers when he was a teenager and writing music, and just also like...
Which was in the 80s, early 80s.
Yeah, early 80s, like building his own computers and writing programs. So, he's highly creative as well, and just has this curious, inquisitive mind, wants to figure things out.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's fair to say that you had a nice little zone of influence there. Mm-hmm. So you before you got into high school, do you see sort of threads of making, of performing before you get into high school? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was like I said, I was performing at a very early age. I would get on stage while the gypsy players were performing the Russian music, and I would just start twirling on stage and dancing, you know, while the midst of them performing. And I would put on puppet shows for my parents. I would, I had my first Sony, I think it's my first Sony, this little tape recorder, and had a radio. And I would put together soundtracks for the puppet shows. So I would pre-record everything, all of the sound effects, and I would record little bits of music, and I would write up a very loose outline of what the puppet show was going to be. And then I would go into the refrigerator. I would take the pickles out of the refrigerator, put them in individual Ziploc bags, and then sell the pickles back to my parents.
Just an audience of two.
Just an audience of two.
How much would you make from
selling
two pickles?
I think I sold them the pickles for 25 cents each. So I think I made 50 cents per puppet show on pickles. And I would set up it would happen in the hallway. So we had a den that would go into a hallway, and then there were 2 bedrooms that were attached to the hallway. And I would put pillows down on the bottom of the entrance to the hallway. I would stack up like a wall, and then I would lay down in the hallway so that I was hidden, and then I would hold up my puppets.
And what would you make the puppets out of?
I think a lot of the puppets were stuffed animals, but
okay, so they weren't really puppets.
But I think also I did create puppets, but they were just like cutouts, paper cutouts.
Yeah.
And then I would lay down there, and I would have my little Sony right beside me, and I'd press play the appropriate times, and I would do the puppet show.
So, I mean, it sounds like a lot of it was about the performance.
Yes.
Like, it wasn't necessarily... So, it sounds like you weren't necessarily making objects. Like, you weren't making the puppets, but you were performing a thing. Like, you were setting a stage. You were creating a zone.
Yes.
A feeling. You wanted to create a show.
Yes. I wanted to create a show.
Yeah.
I guess I still do.
Yeah. Well, and so then you got into theater in high school. I was not in theater at all. I don't have a whole what was that like? I mean, like what was that community like? Was it supportive?
Totally supportive.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was it was the first time since the Renaissance Festival that I felt like I was surrounded by other people who were outsiders and who were strange and who were very different from one another, all different shapes and sizes and colors and sexual orientations. Although at that time it wasn't as out loud and out and open.
It wasn't as easy to be out. Yeah.
No, not at all. But still, we all came together, and it was like, we're going to come together and put this show on, and we're going to, do this. And I loved that. I loved all aspects of it. I loved making the sets, and folding the programs, and staying late and painting and running over lines with other people and figuring out the costumes and all of it.
So like kind of seeing all the different facets of what it takes to make a larger kind of production. Yeah. And so, you also been in photography, which is a more sort of solitary thing.
Yeah.
Although you've managed to kind of bring collaborative elements into photography. Do you see a thread there between how you have expressed and experienced through more kind of communal performance type arts and photography? Do you see a commonality in there?
I feel like photography really trained my eye to look at circumstance and setting and unusual and unexpected ways, and also to think about lighting and think about mood and atmosphere. And I think my photography never really was about the classic photography. It was always like I was trying to capture movement, and I was always trying to like create these experiments of what would happen if I do, like, if I, like the thing you helped me with, if I turn off all the lights and you hold a flashlight and I just dance in front of the camera for 15 minutes while you shine the flashlight on me, what would get captured, So it was always kind of this exploration of the what if and the unexpected and serendipitous moments.
Do you feel like it like pulled another aspect of your creativity out, because it's a totally different process? Right?
Well, I always felt like I was a chemist or a magician when I was doing photography, and even though it was about the experimentation and it, I still do photography and I still explore video work, especially recently. There is an attention to detail and in getting things precise that I would say has transferred over to the work that I do with dance and performance. And I can't quite tell you exactly how it transfers over.
But it's different than maybe your experience with performance in the past.
Well, my experience with performance in the past has radically changed to my understanding and experience of performance now.
Sure.
Because I feel like in the past, my understanding of performance, even though I shared all out about, like, it was about putting together a show and it was working with other people, it was still very ego-driven. And it was still very much about, I hope I'm liked. I hope I'm accepted. I hope,
But how old were you when the last play you put on was?
I was pretty young.
18?
No.
19?
No. 20?
You were 20, the last play?
Well, no. I was play. The last play, 19.
So, performance.
Performance was last year.
But there was a break. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there was a break. You had this, like, initial sort of part of your creative expression when you were younger was performance-based. And then you pivoted.
Yeah.
Into photo-based work.
Sure. But even when I was doing photography, I never fully let go of the performance. I mean, do you remember that performance I did with Aaron, Shannon, and Andrew at Barnevelder?
Sure.
I mean, I think that was right after we graduated.
You didn't do a lot of that, though.
No, I didn't. But it wasn't something that I ever fully let go of, even if I tried to. It just kind of stuck around.
Yeah. I guess what I'm kind of digging for here is like what you took, what getting into a medium like photography gave you that performance either could not or just didn't.
I just have to say before I answer that question that one of the things that might be different about this is I can say something and you can totally fact check me. Like, you can be with your other guests, they might say something and you're like, okay, I'll just accept that, what you just said. But for me, you're like, wait, but hold on. I was there. This happened.
Has that come up yet?
I don't know. It might have just...
I'm not fact checking this episode, guys. Okay.
Okay. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Thanks.
What I'm digging for here is there something that you got from working in a medium like photography that added to your skill set, to your tool belt, that performance before then didn't or couldn't, that you're now kind of like taking with you in a new way?
Sure. Well, I guess one thing I could say about that is now when I'm thinking of performance, not all the time, but a lot of times I'm thinking of it in a multimedia way. So I'm not just envisioning dance. I'm envisioning, like, is there video? What's the sound like? What is the lighting schematics? And I do think that came from me doing photography and digital media, that wasn't there before. I wasn't thinking about that. I was just thinking about the performance.
And what does that do for movement?
What does that do for movement? Well, it gives there more opportunity to have relationship with other components. It's not just about the physical movements, but like, how am I in relationship? How is the lighting affecting? Like, how am I in relationship with the lighting? How am I in relationship with, if there is video projection? And seeing it more holistically that way. Like the performance I did with Scott for the Reconciliation Showcase 2 years ago, it wasn't just about the performance. It wasn't just about what was happening with Scott and I. It was like this whole other thing, this video that was happening behind that. In some ways, I spent a lot more energy and time on creating that video and having it be in dialogue with what Scott and I were doing.
Yeah. That's cool.
And also the performance at Form and Concept. I mean, there was no video, but I don't know how many hours I spent putting together the soundtrack for that.
Yeah, you did.
And that wasn't there before doing photography and digital media.
Yeah, and all of those things, they do assist in creating an atmosphere, right? In expanding the idea of what your setting is and how a story can be told. Different sort of elements that can help a story along in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The word that came to mind was envelop. There's a desire for the performance or the story to envelop one. And so, part of that is the music, the soundtrack, the lighting, but it's also, for me right now, what I'm exploring with the group is like how vulnerable and authentic and with what is arising in the moment can we be. So it's not about being a virtuoso, but it's more about being incredibly authentic and true to what the moment is asking for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a great segue too, right? We didn't really talk about what your group is, right? So you've been practicing improv dance, right?
Yeah.
So what you just described, to me anyway, sounds like the kind of essence of what you do.
Yeah.
Through improv.
Yeah. I've been practicing 5 rhythms for almost 7 years now, and
Which
5 rhythms is a movement practice that was developed by Gabrielle Roth that is a meditation of sorts, and it's a way of working with what she stated are the 5 rhythms of life. And that has many different matrices and matrices and maps in it. But the rhythms are flowing, staccato, chaos, which we are in now, lyrical, and stillness. And so it is very much a practice about finding your authentic expression in each of those rhythms. So I found that after I had a pretty major surgery and was not able to move or do much for 2 months. And And it was a way that it was a medium. It was a path towards my healing from that surgery. And it also completely revolutionized and shifted the way that I was thinking about dance and movement. And it shifted from feeling like dance and performance was supposed to be about doing the virtuoso and doing the perfect, leaps and twirls and into it being an offering of the most intimate and vulnerable private needs of one, and having that be witnessed and sharing that so that there can be hopefully a connection to someone watching it and feeling that.
But Five Rhythms is not a public practice.
It's not a public practice, no, but it really informed and informs the practice that this group does.
Yeah.
A lot of us are Five Rhythms practitioners.
Yeah.
And in our group, there are people who are professional dancers who have immense training, and there are people who have never performed before, and who just love movement. And so it's not about perfection, and it's not about being super athletes. Mm-hmm. It's about, can you be vulnerable and raw and fluid and change and shift, and be dynamic, all unscripted.
Time to shut the door.
We're having a kiddie moment here.
So I think a lot of people might not have. So you're working towards a performance.
Yes.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about how maybe your rehearsals look? How do you prepare for a performance that is entirely based on improv?
Mm-hmm. Well, the performance will not be completely based off of improv.
Okay.
Our vision is to weave together choreography, to weave together modern contemporary choreography, because there are people in our group that love that is a big love of theirs, and weave it into improv seamlessly. This is our vision. This is what we're hoping for. And how you practice for improv is you get together and you do improv, and you really get to know the other person's language, and it's also about practicing dropping into who you are and being really honest with how you're showing up, and like cutting away or like wading through all of the shoulds and all of the doubts, and becoming very strong and centered and presentness, being present. So it is in some ways, it is a meditation. And you just do that over and over and over and over again with the same people, and you build a trust, and that's how you practice.
Yeah. Can you give an example of like some of the exercises that you do?
Let's see. Well, we have one exercise that's kind of like the foundation, I guess, of our group, and we call it shuffle play. It was actually coined by one of Caitlin's friends. It's perfect, and we had a very informal, small showing back in, when was that? December? Called shuffle play, and essentially, we have a playlist of songs that are incredibly varied, and 3 or more people will start dancing, and we play the music, and at any point someone can go up and say pause.
Somebody who's not dancing.
Someone who's not dancing, say pause, press shuffle play on the playlist, and then tap someone out. And I kind of adapted this from a theater improv exercise.
So it plays a song that the dancers don't know that's coming.
Exactly.
They have to adapt.
And you adapt.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes you adapt to the music, but oftentimes what we've been discovering or working with is that there's something going on within the group. There's something that's wanting to show up and be expressed within the group. And how do you stay true to that, even if the music is really different? And trusting that over the music, or over, you know, oh, I need to be doing this, or I'm just standing here. Nothing's happening. And that's another thing, right? That we've been working with is like, when you're on stage, you're a part of something, regardless of if you're still, if you're not connecting with other people, you're still part of the performance. And how, again, do you stay with being present in that and listening to what wants to come through you in that moment, not what you think you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that's great. And that's not something you really consider until you start working with a group of people consciously practicing improv.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's some of the things that I love hearing about from you, is like these discoveries of like just what comes out when you get together with a group of 10 or more people and just start moving together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so when you say like, well, what's coming out, what's this sort of thread that's coming out in the group? You know, not like, okay, how do we move best to this new song that just showed up?
No.
But how do you continue the story and the thread? You know, and like you said, it becomes more about the authenticity of the moment versus creating some kind of pretty form or whatever kind of form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's requiring, I think, from all of us way more adaptability and flexibility and letting go of what we think is supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And listening to what does want to happen. That there's something greater than us individually that's coming through. Mm-hmm. And I feel that is applicable to where we find ourselves right now as a human species. That's what's being asked, is that we pause on our own agendas and listen to what is the message that's coming through. As a collective, what needs to be birthed.
Yeah. It's good. You had mentioned earlier you wanted to dive into another area. Can you refresh my memory? You wanted to talk about our relationship?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's our anniversary.
Right.
Like we said, we've been married for 13 years, but we've been together for almost 21.
Practicing improv.
Exactly. And, you know, going through many waves and many evolutions individually and as a couple. And I wanted to talk about that, like what that requires, and in terms of creativity and also in terms of evolving and a practice. It is a practice.
The same guy I mentioned earlier asked me, you know, what did he ask me? He was asking me about like, I think he just said, "What's that like?"
What's that like?
What's that like?
The one that you were hiking with.
Yeah.
Okay. Lucian.
Yeah. And
what's that like?
What's that like?
What's that like?
There is what the way I answered it was that there's something that's really reassuring and grounding about being with somebody that's seen you through a lot of different changes. So 19 to 40.
Yeah.
And I said that both you and I are fairly independent people and are fairly committed to our own personal growth. That is probably priority number one in each of our lives independently. And that means that we're going to change, which requires a sense of spaciousness, a willingness to let go of what you want your partner to be, how you think they should show up for you. And so I feel like we've managed to work through a lot of iterations of that. And it's funny because I don't know that we necessarily end up talking about it super directly a lot of the time. Like I mean, we do sometimes, of course, but like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of it just happens. Like there's a sort of implicit understanding that I feel like we have with one another that it's like we're working through it.
Would you call that trust?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The bumper sticker that's really popular here in Santa Fe. Don't believe everything you think. It popped into my mind as a practice. For this relationship, but for a lot of things, but especially for this relationship. And I feel as I've gotten older, I'm getting a little bit better at it. I feel like when we were younger, I was a lot more stubborn and hot-headed, with wanting to be right. And that still comes up sometimes, but I feel like I can I can be a little bit more silly and poke fun at that. But I feel like that's a huge practice in being in relationship, long-term relationship, is not believing everything that I think. Or another way to say that is letting go of being right, like pausing on needing to be right and asking a question. I ask this a lot actually when we do have conflict, is what do I ultimately want? And do I want to be right? And usually that's not the case. Usually I want to feel heard and seen. Again, going back to the beginning of this podcast, I want to be heard. I want to be seen. I want to be accepted. I want to know that, that I have love. And so sometimes the way, like, arriving at that is not by being right. Like, that's what my mind tells me. But often it's about pausing and opening my heart and listening, which is, very much what I practice with the dance and what I try to practice with my massage and what I just try to practice all around. And then recognizing or believing that that's what you ultimately want as well. And then another piece piece of it is this bringing it back to improv, but this is a theater thing, and it also transfers over to movement improv, which is the practice of yes, and. Mm-hmm. So that whenever someone in improv brings something to you or says something, the response is yes, and you build on it. Mm-hmm. Rather than no. You never shut down, because that just shuts down the scene. Mm-hmm. And I feel like,
and you don't just sit there and go,
yeah, right, exactly. You build on it. And so I think that's part of being in long-term relationship as well. That and I don't always succeed in this. I'm not always perfect at doing this.
You're not perfect yet?
No, not yet. But when you bring me something, I want to do this shop, and I want to have that Oaxacan pottery and prints, and I want to, this is what I want to do. It's yes, okay, and let's build on this. Mm-hmm. Or whatever. Let's make borscht soup tonight. Yes, okay. And that's not always easy, and sometimes there is the need to say, like, wait, hold on, pause. Mm-hmm. Let's look at this. Mm-hmm. But I had a friend recently talk about that, like, most of their arguments that got started in their relationship because essentially one person, like, relating it to being a child on the playground and finding something really fabulous and special to you, and then bringing it to someone else and being like, look at this amazing thing that I just found. And then the other person being like, I don't understand, or that's not cool, or
isn't this one that I found better?
Yeah, that's okay, but look at this cool thing that I found, rather than, wow, that is really cool. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that. Mm-hmm. And just thinking about, like, that's still in us. Like, we're still that little kid on the playground that's, like, finding all these really cool things that move us, and wanting to find someone else that is just like, yeah, that is really cool. Mm-hmm. Wow, let's do something with that. And so thinking about the yes and.
Right. Another one that I mention to people sometimes when, like 12 years, how does that work? How do you do it? It's like not assuming I know you. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times I get into a place of feeling out of sync, out of relationship, or it's like expectations get missed, is when I assume I know who you are and what your motives are. And it's all based on some story I have in my head. Yeah. And one of the things that for me is consciously practicing the remembrance that I have no idea who you are. Mm-hmm. And that, what I've learned about you through our years of experience together is really a fraction, a very, very small fraction of who you ultimately are. Mm-hmm. Because of course, whatever, we don't have to talk about it, but it's like we all have our own inner rich lives that don't get expressed outwardly, that are impossible to express outwardly. Sure. Right? So what is it that is our beingness? Can anybody ever fully understand another's entire, expression of beingness? And so when I feel like when I'm remembering that, it makes me curious. Mm-hmm. It makes me empathetic. It makes me excited. It makes me want to listen. Yeah. When I drop the assumption, because of course we all get into patterns, and there's certain things that I repeat and that I say, and that ways of being that I get into that you might be, oh, I know what he's going to say, or vice versa, I know what you're going to say. Mm-hmm. But letting that go consciously is just a real easy way to get into that zone of of presence, right?
Yeah.
The I don't know.
Yeah.
That, your dad might say Zen mind, beginner's mind, that living in that sense of I don't know. And then let's bring it back to Corona time. Like
Corona time.
Corona time.
Not the
and we
beer.
ain't talking about the beer. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Ignore
that.
Crisis exposes our ignorance. Mm-hmm. It exposes the fact that we have no idea what's going to happen. We don't know when we're going to die. We don't know how long we got left. Mm-hmm. We don't know how any of this is going to shake out. And we create and construct a lot of different things to try to soothe that and convince us otherwise.
Yeah.
But I find that the more I consciously try to live in that zone of I don't know, it's just so rewarding and live wire, and I get so much out of it. Mm-hmm. That takes it back to improv too, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you have to trust.
Yeah. And be fully committed. Yeah. 100% trust. Or even if in that moment you don't fully trust, you commit to that. Like, I'm not fully in. I commit to that. Mm-hmm. Being honest with whatever is arising.
Because you learn.
Yeah. And I remember, so there's a teacher. Oh, man. Brain fog. And Reb Anderson, who was maybe one of the first. No, that's not true. He was a teacher that woke me up. That pierced a lot of stuff, a lot of veils, and within my understanding of what it means to be a human and what it means to be of service. But I remember I used to have this job retouching advertisements for a digital imaging group, and it was in Heights in Houston, Texas, Heights, and it was right by Heights Boulevard. And I would go on my lunch break, I would walk down Heights Boulevard, and I would listen to Reb Anderson talk. And there was this one Dharma talk he was giving that said something like, every opportunity is a doorway. Every moment is a door. 10,000 doors. And he was talking about no matter what arises, that's a door. That's a doorway into awakening. So even a moment of confusion, even a moment of hate, even a moment of apathy, like if we bring our attention to it fully, 100%, that is a doorway into becoming enlightened. And that really stuck with me, and I still think about that in terms of improv, that like whatever's showing up, I'm bored, like committing to that, really investigating that can open up this whole beautiful interesting tableau. Mm-hmm. But it's just like don't abandon it, don't dismiss it.
Yeah. The other thing, again, the hiking buddy today, he asked me like, do you ever think about like, he was kind of like asking me like, what about all the other relationships you could have had, mm-hmm. right? The what ifs, mm-hmm. He was kind of like, do you ever think about like, oh, what about, going this way or that way or the dating or whatever? And I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, it's like, I think the mind always comes up with those what if scenarios, but it was like the value that comes from commitment that comes from really accepting and diving into what's appearing, what's showing up, is like, I don't really spend a lot of time with that.
Yeah.
What could have been.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about in regards to a relationship. Like, I mean, there's plenty of like what ifs that come in that can derail me. But like, I think what you're talking about there is like the what ifs aren't important.
Mm-hmm.
What's important is like what's here now, what's showing up now.
Mm-hmm.
Like the what ifs, they're gone.
Yeah.
It's past.
Yeah.
How do we react to and not react, but how do we act?
Mm-hmm.
How do we respond
mm-hmm.
to what's showing up now?
Yeah. And embrace it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Is there an artist, an exhibition, a performance, a teacher even, that for you sticks out in your mind as somebody who really was an aha moment for you, or changed your trajectory, or really expanded in a big way what you thought about art and creativity?
Oof. I mean, there's so many. I feel like Webb Anderson was one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I guess Suzanne Bloom comes to mind.
Okay.
Who was my photo teacher my senior year, my last year. I don't know if you call it senior year. It's not your senior year. Last year in college.
Senior year encompassed like a couple of years.
Yeah, right. And she is this, I'm hoping she's still this way, very curious, open-minded, generous with her attention and time teacher. And there was this project that I was working on that was actually, there was a man there that came to Empire Cafe where Frank and I worked. We were both servers there, and he came every single day with his life partner. Do you remember his name? Steve?
I don't remember who you're talking about.
Steve, I think his name is Steve, and he practiced bondage.
Oh, right. Uh-huh.
And so I wanted to do a documentary. I wanted to photograph him, and he allowed me to come to his house, and he put on his whole bondage gear and showed me the various tools that he used, and let me photograph him. And so I made, afterwards I had made my contact sheet of the work, and I was going to tell a story about who he was and what it was like for him to be gay, openly gay, and also practice bondage, and just his life. And his partner had AIDS. And so I had all my contact sheets, and I was trying to figure out like the storyline of how this was going to go together. And Suzanne comes with scissors, and she just starts cutting up the contact sheets, and then taking all the little individual pieces and rearranging them and going, what about this? What about this? And it was this moment of dropping the sacredness, or the specialness of how things were arranged, like they had to be arranged in this order, and letting go of that, and then just playing. And then she always, it seemed like that's how she approached the creative process. And it was a turning point for me, because before then I had taken it in some ways very, very seriously. And it was like, this is the way, this is the order, this is how it's supposed to be. and just fretting over that. And she was like, no, you can just take your scissors, you can cut it up, you can start over, you can let this go and just play.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, kind of what I was talking about a minute ago with, thinking you know somebody. Like, you have a kind of preconceived notion of how you want this project to turn out.
Right.
Right. And because you have, oh God, what was I was listening to somebody talking about making movies, and they were saying you have the movie you conceptualize. You have the movie that you talk about with your friends. You have the movie that you write. You have the movie that you rehearse. You have the movie that you shoot. You have the movie that you edit. And then you have the movie that's on the screen. And they are all different.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
And being able to let go each time that whatever is wanting to come through and be birthed lets itself known, and practicing honing that skill of listening and letting go of your agenda. So I feel like, she really mirrored that to me. Letting go of the agenda that you have set forth and getting loose and exploring.
Yeah.
Which is now my favorite thing
Yeah.
to do with the performance.
Right.
In general.
Yeah. So we have Unnamed Dance Company performing maybe in June. We'll find out. I'll certainly be broadcasting that signal whenever it comes up. So if you want to know when this particular unnamed improv dance group performs, I will definitely be spreading the word. I guess it all just, we don't know. We don't know how this whole thing's going to shake out. So, cool. That was fun.
Yeah, we did it. Okay.
Bye.